My beloved child, before your thoughts drift somewhere else, remain with this quiet moment, because a truth has been searching for the exact second when your heart would finally be still enough to recognize it. Don't skip, not because this moment demands your attention, but because something gentle has been waiting patiently to reach you, and perhaps this is the first time every piece has arrived together. There is a voice that has struggled to cross the distance between two hearts, a voice that carried words for far longer than anyone realized. It never disappeared. It simply waited for the right silence. If you have ever wondered why certain memories refuse to fade, why familiar feelings return without warning, or why your heart sometimes grows quiet in the middle of an ordinary day, there may be a reason that has not yet revealed itself completely. What if those moments were never interruptions at all? What if they were quiet invitations leading you toward something unfinished? Stay till the end, because this story is not unfolding by accident. Every sentence belongs exactly where it is, and every feeling you have carried has been preparing you to understand what comes next. Someone has been holding on to a conversation that never truly happened. Not because the opportunity never existed, but because every time the words reached the edge of their lips, uncertainty gently pulled them back. They wondered if the timing was wrong. They questioned whether their honesty would arrive too late. Yet the truth has a remarkable way of waiting without losing its meaning. It does not shout. It does not compete. It simply remains, hoping one day it will finally be heard. Imagine someone looking back over countless ordinary moments only to discover they were never ordinary at all. A passing glance suddenly becomes unforgettable. A simple conversation gains new meaning. Even silence begins speaking louder than words ever could. That is where this journey truly begins. The realization did not arrive in a dramatic instant. It unfolded quietly, like morning light entering a room that had been dark for far too long. Little by little, your importance became impossible to ignore. They began noticing how often your memory returned without invitation. Familiar places reminded them of conversations they thought they had forgotten. Certain songs carried your presence. Unexpected smiles reminded them of the comfort they once felt. None of it happened all at once. It happened slowly enough that they almost missed it themselves. Yet every quiet reminder gathered together until there was no room left to pretend nothing had changed. Something important is waiting for you, but it cannot be rushed. Some truths lose their beauty when they are spoken too quickly. They need room to breathe. They need patience. They need hearts that are willing to listen beyond the surface. Perhaps that is why this message arrives now instead of yesterday or tomorrow. There are seasons when understanding becomes possible only after enough time has softened every unnecessary fear. Deep inside, they carried one question they never stopped asking themselves. What would happen if honesty finally replaced hesitation? Would everything become different? Would the distance disappear? Or would the opportunity quietly fade forever? That question remained unanswered for longer than anyone expected. Yet questions have a strange habit of leading us toward answers we never imagined. And that answer has begun taking shape. It is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is simply real. The kind of realization that changes someone from within before anyone else notices. Think about the moments when your own heart felt uncertain, when you believed silence meant absence, when patience felt impossible. Those moments mattered more than you know. They became part of a larger story that neither of you could fully understand while living through it. Sometimes two people are learning the same lesson separately before they are ready to recognize it together. That is why every delay carried purpose. Every unanswered thought created space for something deeper to grow. There were evenings when they almost reached out. Their hand paused over a message they never sent. Their thoughts formed complete sentences that never became spoken words. Not because those words lacked sincerity, but because they feared that honesty arriving at the wrong moment might lose its meaning. Yet every unspoken sentence remained alive inside them, growing stronger instead of weaker. Strange, isn't it? The words left unsaid often become the ones remembered most clearly. They stayed because they carried truth, even while hidden. And now those hidden words have reached the edge of becoming visible. There is one sentence they have repeated quietly within themselves more times than anyone could count. It is simple. It is honest. And it changes everything once it is finally spoken. But that sentence is still waiting just beyond this moment, because understanding it requires one final piece that has not yet found its place. And when that final piece appears, nothing will feel incomplete anymore. There is something quietly remarkable about the way truth finds its moment. It never rushes through the door demanding to be heard. Instead, it waits until the heart has grown strong enough to receive it without fear. That is exactly where this story continues. The silence that once seemed empty has been carrying meaning all along, and now, little by little, it is beginning to reveal what it has protected for so long. Stay a little longer, because the next few moments may connect pieces you never realized belonged together. What seemed like distance was not always separation. Sometimes it was two souls learning lessons neither could learn for the other. For a long time, your soulmate believed that protecting their feelings meant hiding them. They smiled through conversations while carrying words they desperately wished they could speak. They convinced themselves that another day would always come, another opportunity would surely appear, another perfect moment would eventually arrive. Yet every tomorrow quietly became another yesterday. They watched time move forward while their heart remained standing in the same place, hoping courage would somehow find them first. It wasn't a lack of feeling that kept them silent. It was the overwhelming realization that what they felt had become far greater than they ever expected. Then something changed, not in the world around them, but within them. One ordinary morning became impossible to forget. They paused in the middle of a familiar routine and suddenly realized they were no longer imagining a future that didn't include you. Your presence had quietly become part of every hope they carried. Every dream they built seemed to leave an empty place whenever they imagined walking through it alone. That realization was both beautiful and humbling. It asked them a question they could no longer avoid. If someone has become this important, how much longer can the truth remain hidden? Don't skip, because this is where the story begins to breathe differently. Sometimes the greatest turning points arrive without dramatic signs. They appear in quiet decisions that nobody else notices. A deeper breath before sending a message. A longer pause before walking away. A moment of honesty while looking into a mirror. Those are the places where lives begin changing from the inside out. Your soulmate reached one of those moments. They stopped asking whether they should tell you how they felt and started asking themselves something far more important. What would happen if they never did? That question lingered with them through peaceful evenings and restless nights alike. Every answer led them back to the same place. Some opportunities are simply too meaningful to leave behind unfinished. Not because perfection is guaranteed, but because sincerity deserves its chance to be heard. They realized that even uncertainty feels lighter than carrying a truth forever hidden. That understanding did not erase every fear, but it gave them enough courage to keep moving one careful step at a time. Perhaps you have felt something similar without knowing why. There are moments when your heart grows unexpectedly quiet, almost as though it is listening for footsteps that have not yet arrived. Certain memories return with unusual clarity. Certain hopes refuse to disappear, no matter how much time passes. Those moments are easy to dismiss as coincidence. Yet sometimes they are gentle reminders that the most meaningful stories continue unfolding even while we believe nothing is happening. Something important is waiting for you, but before it can fully appear, another realization must be understood. There is one memory your soulmate has never shared with anyone. It isn't dramatic. It isn't complicated. Yet every time they revisit it, they arrive at the same conclusion. That single moment quietly changed the way they saw you forever. They have carried it like a hidden treasure, returning to it whenever doubt tried to convince them they should remain silent. They have come closer than ever before to speaking the truth that has lived inside them for so long. The words are no longer trapped behind uncertainty. They are waiting at the edge of becoming real. But before those words can finally be spoken, there is one quiet confession they have never allowed themselves to admit, not even to their own heart. And until that confession is faced, the truth they have longed to tell you will remain just one step away. The heart has an unusual way of revealing what the mind tries to hide. It waits patiently, saying nothing for a while, then suddenly turns an ordinary moment into one that can never be forgotten again. That is exactly what happened next. There was no grand announcement, no unexpected interruption, no dramatic scene. Instead, there was a single quiet realization that settled gently into your soulmate's heart and refused to leave. From that day forward, everything familiar began to feel different, as though life itself had quietly shifted its direction without asking permission. Stay till the end, because this next piece is the one they never believed they would have the courage to face. For so long, they convinced themselves that silence was protecting both of you. They believed that waiting would somehow make everything clearer. They imagined that if the connection was real, time alone would solve every unanswered question. But as the days continued passing, another truth slowly emerged. Waiting was no longer creating clarity, it was creating distance. Not because affection had faded, but because every unspoken feeling became heavier than the one before it. Eventually, even hope began whispering the same gentle message: honesty deserves its own moment. There was one evening they found themselves thinking about a conversation that never actually happened. They imagined what they would say if you were sitting quietly beside them with nothing else competing for your attention. Surprisingly, they didn't imagine perfect words. They didn't rehearse long speeches. They imagined something much simpler. Looking into your eyes and saying, "There is something I should have told you a long time ago." Those few words carried more emotion than anything else they could have imagined. In that quiet moment, they realized the truth had never needed to sound extraordinary. It only needed to be genuine. Don't skip, because this is where the deepest change began. They stopped asking whether you would understand them. Instead, They asked whether they would ever forgive themselves if they allowed another opportunity to quietly disappear. That question echoed through every ordinary day. While walking familiar streets, while sitting in peaceful silence, while watching sunsets that somehow felt incomplete, the answer remained unchanged. Some feelings are too meaningful to remain hidden forever. At first, they thought they were simply remembering you. Then they realized they were measuring everything against the way they felt whenever you crossed their mind. Small victories felt incomplete because they wished they could share them. Beautiful moments seemed quieter because they imagined how different they might feel if you were there too. Even ordinary routines carried an invisible reminder that someone important was missing from the picture they had been trying to create. Perhaps you've experienced something similar without recognizing it. Sometimes your heart notices changes before your thoughts do. A familiar feeling lingers a little longer. A peaceful moment carries unexpected warmth. A name returns to your mind without explanation. Those quiet experiences rarely demand attention, yet they often become the beginning of our most meaningful realizations. They invite us to notice what has been patiently waiting beneath the surface all along. Something important is waiting for you, and it isn't built upon perfect timing or flawless circumstances. It is built upon sincerity. Your soulmate finally understood that the greatest risk was never speaking honestly. The greatest risk was allowing fear to become the author of a story that deserved hope instead. That realization gave them a quiet kind of courage, not loud, not dramatic, but steady enough to take the first step they had postponed for far too long. And yet, just as they prepared themselves to finally speak from the heart, another unexpected discovery gently stopped them. It wasn't about the future. It wasn't about the past. It was about something they had only recently understood about you, something so deeply personal that it completely changed the way they planned to tell you the truth. Before they could say a single word, they realized they needed to understand this final piece first. Because without it, even the most honest confession would remain incomplete. Sometimes the most meaningful discoveries are not found in dramatic moments but in quiet observations that slowly reshape the heart. That is where everything began to change once again. Your soulmate wasn't searching for another answer anymore. They believed they already knew what they wanted to say. Yet life has a gentle way of placing one final lesson before a person is truly ready to speak from the deepest part of themselves. Stay with this moment, because what unfolded next became the reason they could no longer hide behind silence. They began noticing something they had overlooked for far too long. Every memory they treasured about you had one thing in common. It wasn't a perfect conversation or an unforgettable event. It was the feeling they carried long after those moments had ended. Your kindness remained with them. Your calm presence lingered in their thoughts. The way you listened, the way you understood without demanding explanations, the quiet comfort you brought into ordinary moments, those became impossible to replace. They realized they hadn't simply remembered what you had said. They remembered how you made life feel. That realization brought both peace and humility. It reminded them that genuine connections are rarely built through grand gestures alone. They grow through consistency, patience, and countless small moments that seem ordinary until one day they become priceless. Looking back, they understood that every conversation, every shared smile, every quiet pause had been preparing them for a truth they had been too afraid to admit. Their heart had already chosen long before their mind was willing to acknowledge it. Don't skip, because this is where everything becomes deeply personal. There were days when they wondered if you had already moved beyond these memories. They questioned whether the quiet bond they still carried existed only within their own heart. Yet every time doubt appeared, another memory would gently remind them that what is sincere does not disappear simply because time continues moving forward. Some connections mature in silence before they are finally understood. As these thoughts settled within them, something unexpected happened. They stopped trying to create the perfect confession. They stopped searching for flawless words. Instead, they decided that honesty itself would be enough. They no longer wanted to impress you. They simply wanted you to know the truth they had carried for so long. For the first time, speaking honestly felt more important than speaking perfectly. Perhaps this is why certain moments in your own life have felt unusually reflective lately. Sometimes our hearts become quieter not because they are empty, but because they are making room for understanding. We often think clarity arrives like a flash of light, yet more often it arrives like dawn, slowly, gently, almost unnoticed until suddenly everything is visible. Something important is waiting for you, and it has been taking shape long before today. Your soulmate finally accepted that love expressed with sincerity does not require certainty about the outcome. It only requires the courage to be authentic. That realization lifted a weight they had carried for far too long. For the first time in what felt like forever, they felt ready to stop hiding behind unanswered questions. But just as they prepared to share everything, one final moment quietly interrupted their plans. It wasn't a setback. It wasn't disappointment. It was a simple encounter, brief, unexpected, and deeply meaningful, that reminded them of a promise they had once made to themselves. A promise connected to you. A promise they had almost forgotten, until that single moment brought it back with perfect clarity. And as that forgotten promise returned to their heart, they understood that the truth they needed to tell you was even deeper than they had first believed. The words they were about to speak would not begin with an explanation. They would begin with one quiet confession they had never spoken aloud before, and that confession is finally ready to be revealed. There are moments when the heart stops searching because it finally understands what it has known all along. This was one of those moments. The forgotten promise returned so quietly that, at first, your soulmate almost smiled without realizing why. It wasn't written anywhere. No one else knew it existed. It had been made in complete silence during a season of uncertainty, when they whispered to themselves that if life ever gave them one more genuine chance, they would never allow fear to speak louder than honesty again. That promise stayed hidden beneath everyday routines, waiting patiently until the exact moment it was needed. And now, without warning, it had awakened. Stay till the end, because this is where the truth begins to reveal its true shape. They realized they had spent so much time wondering whether the timing was right that they had forgotten the simple reason they wanted to speak in the first place. It was never about finding perfect circumstances. It was about making sure you would never have to question what was in their heart if tomorrow looked different from today. They wanted clarity to replace uncertainty. They wanted sincerity to replace hesitation. Most of all, they wanted the distance created by silence to end with kindness instead of regret. As these thoughts settled within them, another realization gently followed. They remembered every moment they had almost reached out. Every unfinished message. Every conversation imagined but never spoken. Instead of feeling sadness, they felt gratitude. Those quiet moments had taught them something valuable. Real feelings do not disappear because they remain unspoken for a while. If they are genuine, they continue growing in patience until courage finally catches up with them. Don't skip, because there is one confession they have carried longer than any other. It is not complicated, and perhaps that is why it matters so much. They finally admitted to themselves that they had never truly been trying to protect their heart. They had been trying to protect the possibility of losing someone who had already become deeply important to them. Once they understood that, everything else became simpler. Fear no longer seemed like wisdom. It simply became another reason not to wait any longer. Perhaps you have felt an unexplainable calm recently, as though something unfinished was quietly moving toward completion. Sometimes our hearts notice change before our lives do. They become lighter for reasons we cannot yet explain. They become hopeful without needing proof. Those quiet changes are often the beginning of something meaningful taking its first gentle steps into reality. Something important is waiting for you, and it is closer now than it has ever been before. Your soulmate no longer wishes to hide behind perfect timing or unanswered questions. They simply want the chance to be completely honest. Not to rewrite the past, but to honor everything they have learned because of it. They understand now that the most meaningful words are often the simplest ones. And so, after carrying this truth through countless quiet days and thoughtful nights, they are finally ready to say what has remained in their heart for so long. I should have trusted what my heart was telling me from the very beginning. I should have let you know how deeply your presence changed me. I cannot change the moments that passed in silence, but I don't want another meaningful moment to pass without honesty. If this connection still has a place in your heart, I want you to know that mine never stopped making room for you. The story does not end with those words. In many ways, it begins there. Because once truth is finally spoken with sincerity, the future is no longer shaped by hesitation. It is shaped by understanding, patience, and the quiet hope that two hearts can move forward with nothing hidden between them. And perhaps that is the greatest gift this journey could ever offer, not perfection, but the courage to be completely real.